Find your happy place this summer. Find your beach or your mountain escape. Find your backyard for the week.
Can you hear me, Shakur?
Yes.
Yes? No?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
I can't hear you. Say something again.
Testing, testing. 1, 2, testing. Testing, testing.
Keep talking, please.
Testing, testing. 1, 2. Testing,
Working.
testing, testing.
Say
1,
it again.
2. Testing.
Keep talking.
Testing, testing. 1, 2.
I can't hear you at all.
Okay.
No. It's not you. It's here. It's just gotta figure it out. Just keep talking.
Okay. Testing, testing. Welcome to
I
our
mean, it's my
ancestors'
computer is what I'm
voices.
saying to you all. It's not.
Welcome to our ancestors' voices. Today, we are acknowledging the background of Cinco de Mayo. We welcome you and we are so happy you are here with us today so we can acknowledge our Indigenous comrades
Keep talking.
and make sure that they have all the support that they need so that they can get their land back.
I don't understand this.
That is the objective, is for us
Keep
to
talking.
support them in getting their land back. That is our goal. We want that for them as African people.
Can you
Okay.
still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Awesome. Okay, cool. No problem.
Aquaba, welcome. Hello, happy Sunday. We hope you're at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength. We are glad that you're here to join us here for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. And we're glad that you're here for this topic today, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo in land reclamation. Cinco de Mayo in land reclamation. So we know that Cinco de Mayo is May 5th, commemorating that day in 1870 when the people of Mexico repelled an attempt by colonial France to further colonize Mexico. Through the bravery and courage of the people of Mexico, they were able to drive the French out of Mexico on that day. And of course, like everything else in this backward capitalist reality, significant historical events are reduced to revelry and getting drunk and having a good time and not making any connection to the real question of whose lands are these. So that's what we're going to talk about today and how that relates to Cinco de Mayo and everything else. So we're glad that you joined us. Obviously, based on our topic today, you know that we give nothing but honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We will continue to do that and support their efforts to reclaim their lands. Our theme for this year's African Liberation Day on May 25th is consistent. It's a consistent theme with our work and our position for the last 50 plus years. Same struggle, smash settler colonialism in Palestine, Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. So we stand firm on that commitment to smash settler colonialism. And of course, the Western Hemisphere, led by the United Snakes of America, this is the leading settler colony on the planet Earth. So we stand against it, and we stand with our indigenous family members in their struggle to regain control of their land. And of course, we honor and respect our African ancestors who placed us here, who put us here, and who gave us our mission to do this work to advance our people, and by doing so, to advance humanity. So we would never stand for any disrespect of our ancestors. And of course, we know there's a lot of that going on today by people who probably just figured out how to spell the word ancestor last night. So we will continue to uphold the dignity of our African ancestors. And so we start, as we always do, just by simply acknowledging this program and who we are. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APRP. And the APRP is a mass revolutionary independent political party with its base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. For us, this is the solution to all of the problems African people face worldwide. We are the victims of settler colonies all over the world, throughout the Western Hemisphere, certainly in Africa, in countries like Azania, or what you call South Africa, or in Zimbabwe, and, you know, to a lesser extent, some other areas in Africa. There's still settler colonies like occupied Palestine, like Australia, like the Americas. And we also suffer from neo-colonialism, which is the system of colonialism being operational and functional as a result of trained Negro adherence to the capitalist and imperialist system. So we have all these things to overcome, but we will overcome them. And the way we will overcome them is by doing the work we're doing to create one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is the result of a scientific strategy laid out in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. And you should check that out. And I'm not suggesting that you read that book individually, but you check it out in the context of the work that the AAPRP does on a collective level. Because if you just read the book individually without understanding its practical application, then you won't understand anything about the work that we're doing, even though most people that do that think they understand it. So you have to do both to understand it. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself and Shakura, my biological, ideological daughter, and both of us being members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And so to get us started on our topic today, Cinco de Mayo and land reclamation, I will turn it over to Shakura.
Thank you. I appreciate that, kind sir. Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. Feliz Cinco de Mayo. This is one of my favorite opportunities to celebrate, or as comrades may call, this is, a ritual in terms of revolutionary organizing, the importance of fighting back, the importance of fighting for what you believe in, and most important, celebrating the fathom notion that colonialism does not get to win all the time. If we can organize ourselves enough, we have the power to fight back, even against colonialism, which is huge. And so, really excited to share some background today. And of course, as always, we are so humbled to acknowledge our efforts, our humble efforts to do the best that we can to be in solidarity, to be allies, and to be in camaraderie with our Indigenous comrades, because we want them to have the same successes in terms of getting their land back, just as we have that goal for ourselves. And so we are with them. We are with you all. We understand the importance of it. We are backing you and fighting with you. And we're very excited for that day to come, as it is approaching, because capitalism is crumbling, right? And so hopefully anyone who has had their land taken is one step closer to getting that sensation of having it back. And so as we start, I would encourage us to understand that this significant day originated on May 5th of 1870. And Cinco de Mayo is the commemoration of Mexican people standing strong to eradicate France's efforts to further their colonization of Mexico. And so, it's so important for us to think about what this day truly represents. And I know Comrade Ajamu alluded earlier to how a lot of folks, because they don't know the background, they do think that it's an excuse or an opportunity to, drink specific alcoholic beverages, particularly those that may be more utilized within the indigenous Mexican community. But in actuality, the whole reason that I love celebrating today is because it's a day of resistance. It's a day of indigenous Mexican people saying, you cannot have this space, you got to go, and doing by any means necessary to get France up out of there and to make France leave Mexico. I mean, what a beautiful day to celebrate. What a joyous day to celebrate. There's so much excitement in the air for me right now, because I think that it's so important for us to be reminded that for generations and generations, groups of people have been fighting back. And I think we lose sight of that every now and then. I think we get so bombarded and so held down by capitalism that we forget that we have the power to push back. We forget that if we come together, we can do what needs to be done. And against the propaganda approaches of capitalism, we also need to be reminded that there are several ways for us to fight back. Voting may be a mechanism that you may find to be useful, but we within the All African People's Revolutionary Party don't see that as a mechanism. We see the understanding the difference between tactics and principles. And so, a tactic is only so good until it doesn't work anymore. And we would argue that voting is definitely a tactic that is not sufficient, partly because the system we live in is not based on a true democracy. It's based on how much power people have associated with their income and their class status. So, saying all that to say, it's really important that we celebrate today, because this is a great example of people coming together that had nothing to do with voting. This is a great example of people coming together and being organized, a great example of people practicing humanity, humility, communication, and understanding that they have something bigger to fight for besides themselves. That's one of the most biggest lessons that we can take from today. If nothing else, it's a reminder that we don't have to be bullied by colonialism. And if we don't have to be bullied by colonialism, then we can learn from Cinco de Mayo. We can learn from the Cuban Socialist Revolution. We can learn from the resistance that's taking place in Haiti. We can learn from the resistance that's taking place on the continent. We can learn from other parts of the world where people are fighting back. We just had May Day where people are fighting back and laborers are arguing for a better work environment with safety, health, and livable wages at their feet. We can understand and learn that we don't have to put up with bad treatment and racism and sexism and patriarchy. We can learn that if you can fight back against colonialism, then you can fight back against anything. And you do not have to tolerate it by any means. You can completely figure out how to organize with other people to fight back. And as I said, this has nothing to do with voting. So again, understanding that there are multiple ways for you to make a difference in this world, right? And so Cinco de Mayo isn't Mexican Independence Day. That would be September 16th. It is a day of dignity for Mexican indigenous people, and it's not a day for you to focus on consuming alcoholic beverages. As I pointed out, this is a day for us to understand that this was a revolutionary day where indigenous Mexican people communicated not just to the rest of the Mexican country, but also to France. You can't have this space and you got to go. You can't be a bully to us anymore. We won't tolerate it. We won't stand for it. You have got to go. We have tried multiple ways to let you know you got to go. And so now we're at this point where we need to go to war and we whooped your behind. So y'all got to go. Like that's the basis of that. And that's where that comes from. And we can think more about how why aren't we talking more about what happened? Why aren't we talking more about the fact that the indigenous Mexican people whooped France's behind and told them y'all got to go? Instead, we are using today as an excuse to get $5 margaritas or $3 margaritas or happy hour that lasts more than 2 hours because it's Cinco de Mayo. So you got to celebrate and get as much alcohol consumption as you can. Well, that's all designed by capitalist propaganda. That's all designed for that. Again, just like they don't want you to have any knowledge, ideology, or wherewithal about any African timelines, any African progressions that took place throughout the course of history or herstory or their story. They also don't want you to have that access to the indigenous Mexican people or indigenous people in general, whether it's other folks that are from South America or other folks that are from other parts of the world. The intent is to keep you as ignorant as possible because if you have access to information, you're going to start to think more critically about just how messed up the systems are that we live in. And that means that you become a threat to capitalism, and that simply won't do. So the intent is to instead distract you by offering $3 margaritas, because I'm assuming that's a really good price, right? And offering you unlimited chips and salsa, right? Because that's the way to get your attention through food and alcohol consumption, instead of making you really curious about the fact that this day means so much more than that. This day means so much more than that. And I would argue the same exact thing is true for St. Patrick's Day, where we don't really understand what the background of that day represents, because that day as well has been exploited through capitalist propaganda as an excuse for folks to consume alcohol without really knowing the truth about what the Irish people have gone through, what their struggles of colonialism has looked like, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge that, because basically capitalism wants to make sure that you stay ignorant. And I really think it's important for folks to ponder that. I really think it's important. Capitalism wants you to stay as ignorant as possible. Like I said, the more access to knowledge you have, the more of a threat you become to the system. Because if you have too much knowledge, then that means you might actually be able to start thinking more critically about things. That means you might start to pick apart things. That means you may start to ask more questions. That means you may start to raise more arguments about things, because now you're seeing the contradictions and you're raising more of that. And that's the problem for capitalism. It's much easier to just keep you ignorant. It is so much easier to do that. And like I said, to distract you with free alcohol, right? And so just thinking more about that and understanding why it's so important for us to join an organization that's working for justice. You can join any organization you want, especially if you identify as being indigenous and you want to join an indigenous organization, if you identify as African and you want to join the All African People's Revolutionary Party, if you identify as European or Irish descent, there are several European organizations that are in fund and complete support of socialism, where we could be happy to direct you to those so that you could still be doing the work, so that all of these groups can really access their land back by working together, not just with other people that look like them, but ultimately with other exploited people from other backgrounds that may not look like them, but still share the same struggle. And that's partly why we have the theme that we have this year for African Liberation Day. So before I move to the next slide, I'll just remind folks that we would graciously appreciate any donations that you all are able to give. We currently have an active Venmo account, so you can find us on Venmo at A-APRP. One more time, we have an active Venmo account at A-APRP. And we also have a PayPal account, which is at AAPRP. Again, we thank you all for any donations that you all can give. And I will ask if you can advance to the next slide, please. So as we continue to think about what this conversation of how detrimental propaganda can be, specifically capitalistic propaganda, I'll say, imperialistic propaganda, right? As we continue to unpack what that really looks like, we can think more about how this particular capitalist system wants to make sure that folks continue to think that everything everywhere for everyone is defined by this really enhanced positive relationship to capitalism. And then that way, anything outside of that realm is very bad, it's dangerous, and it may as well be considered the devil. And so, again, like just kind of, how do you say, romanticizing, if you will, romanticizing that capitalism is good. And if you resist that, then you are considered to be bad. That's why people will argue and say things to you like, you know, you're not being patriotic if you're not celebrating the 4th of July and things like that. But again, we would ask the question, what does capitalism have to do with any of the holidays that are celebrated throughout this world? And specifically within the US imperialist country? Well, we understand that everything that has been established here in the US has been stolen, including some of the people here, right? The resources, the spices, the access to materials, the metals, right? The gold, like all of that has been stolen. African people have been stolen. You see what I'm saying? And so capitalism literally got its start by exploiting off the backs of people, specifically Africans. We can think of the Japanese internment camps and Japanese folks building railroads. We can think of different colonial borders that have taken place, from the Irish folks to the land being stolen from the Palestinians to other colonial situations that are taking place, and just thinking more about how all of that is impacting Asian descent folks, that's impacting African descent folks. We can think about how they had the Berlin Conference, where they divided up Africa like it was a pizza, and like it was different gangs that didn't want to be set tripping, right? So Portuguese, they have their areas, their countries, and Britain, they have their countries, and the French have their countries, right? And so we have all these different examples of how folks have just taken things that were not theirs. And really, in actuality, you know that that's not right. But capitalism is teaching you that your morality compass, I should say, it's teaching you that you need to disregard that. It's teaching you that you need to lose your humanity. And if you don't agree with me, just think about how often you still acknowledge when you see shelterless people. Or are you just starting to become so desensitized to it? Do you feel like they are endangering you? Do you feel like your life is in danger? Do you feel like your safety is in danger? When you see the camps set up on the side of the freeway, and sometimes they're sitting outside of a business that you frequent, maybe you're starting to feel like they're inconveniencing you. Those are different examples of your humanity being disseminated and disintegrated, because at the end of the day, you're really thinking about how these people are interrupting your life But in actuality, what you should be asking is, why is it that it's 100 and something degrees outside, or it's 70 degrees outside, but it's extremely humid, and this person is out on the streets when clearly they need to be in a area where there is AC that is working? It's too hot for them to be outside. And we can argue the same when it's the wintertime. It's too cold for them to be outside. These are inhumane experiences and temperatures where no person should have to live in those spaces. But yet we see that taking place. And that's just one example. We can look at the education in the system and how it's trash. We can look at that. We can think about how the children that we are bringing up in this world to be educated, they are not knowledgeable with the tools that they need. And what I mean by that is they don't have the abilities to think critically. They don't have the abilities to think for themselves. They don't even feel comfortable thinking for themselves because capitalism is so vicious in how it teaches you that you need to rely completely on the agenda setting theory that has already been presented to you. And if you dare to think outside of that, that is risky because then you might be considered unstable. You might be considered crazy. You might be considered unpatriotic. You might be considered sexist or racist. But we don't even understand what those terms really mean. Because if we did, we would understand that those are systems of oppression. Sure, a person can practice the definition of what that looks like, but we're not talking about one person when we say this person is being sexist. We're not talking about one person when we say they're being homophobic. We're talking about an entire system that has influenced all of us to think a specific way about a specific group of people to where we bring them harm. It could be mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever, and where we pretty much think that we are better than them. And I didn't even talk about classism. That's the worst one of them all. So my point is, capitalism does not want you to break these terms down like we just so eloquently did. Capitalism does not want you to think outside of that realm of what I just described. Because if you do, that means that you may actually understand how dangerous this system is. And you may dare to even resist it if you understood truly how dangerous it was. Where this system validates that money is more important than people. What kind of world is that where somebody would want to live in that world? What kind of world is that where people tolerate being treated with disrespect? Because if they're poor, they don't deserve to be valued, right? If they're poor, that's on them. They should have pulled their bootstraps up and they should have worked harder, right? What kind of crazy rhetoric is that? We live in a system where people are unfairly advantaged at birth and others are unfairly disadvantaged at birth. Some of us don't even make it to birth, and some of us die while we're giving birth. So you can't sit here and tell me that this was an equitable system. By no means is that the reality. So my point is, people are already starting at the finish line while some of us are literally trying to get a start. That's my point. And with systems like that in place, how is it that you can respect anyone? Because nothing is based on truth and justice. Nothing is based on humanity. Everything is based on, oh, well, what kind of car do you drive? Oh, do you rent or do you own? Oh, you rent, right? Like I think of that old school episode of Golden Girls, right, where Sophia was in the hospital for something, and there were two insurance claimers in the elevator with her. I don't know how she got left on the elevator, but they didn't understand where the nurse was, the attending nurse or whatever. And she had her wrist ID, but she didn't understand. She was disoriented. So they said, well, what is your name? And she told them her name. And then they said, well, what insurance do you have? Like that matters. Right now, we're just trying to get her off the elevator, but whatever. So she said, what do I look like? I'm on Medicare. And they both stepped back like she had COVID-19, only the episode was taped in the 1980s. So it may have been some other disease like HIV back then. But my point is, that's the system we live in, where you can't even help somebody off the elevator to figure out where their attending nurse went because you are so focused on what status they have, what income they have, what car they drive, do they rent, do they own, how much money do they have, how much education do you have, and how does that contribute to the money that you have? And if you don't make enough money, then you're not considered as valued as the person who does. That is a sick world. That is a sick world. And if you believe that that world is decent, then no offense, but you really need to check your priorities, because that means your humanity is just gone completely. but you can get it back. You can get it back because you weren't born to believe that money is more important than people. That's not how you were born. You were born in a world where people matter. So you need to get that back. And the best way for you to do that, you already know, is to join an organization that is working for justice. The humility alone will bring your ego back down and will remind you that your people need your help. It will remind you that our people are struggling and they need every ounce of what we have, whether it's ideology, maybe it's our tech skills, maybe it's our presentation skills, maybe it's our ability to multitask. Whatever skills we can bring to that organization, you have a responsibility to do that because your ancestors have already paved the way and they have done their duty. Unfortunately, that's why they are not with us because they probably were killed fighting back and resisting. Well, now it's up to us. Otherwise, the future generations will have nothing to show them the way so that they can keep going. It is always going to be up to us to continue fighting so that we can make and improve the conditions for those that are coming after us. That's what I'm saying. It's something bigger than you. That's what you have to convince yourself of. So as I prepare to close, I will remind folks that we are humbly accepting donations. We are doing the best we can to raise money for African Liberation Day, which is another really big ritual that we celebrate within the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And this is the month where we get to celebrate that beautiful, beautiful day that took place so long ago. If you need to watch our seminar on it, definitely go back to our YouTube page because we gave a great seminar explaining the history of ALD or the herstory or the theirstory. But for now, we will ask for our Venmo at A-APRP and our PayPal at AAPRP. Thank you so much and join an organization that's working for justice. And when you go to work tomorrow and somebody tells you how they celebrated Cinco de Mayo, and they probably are not going to acknowledge that the indigenous people fought off the French, correct them and educate them because part of your ability to change the world is to inform people when they are ignorant and miseducated. Okay?
Ashe, Obrigada, Madasi, Asante Sana. Thank you very much. That's exactly where we want to go with the rest of this time we have with you all is talking about Cinco de Mayo and this question of land. And I want to contextualize this within the theme that we have for African Liberation Day 2024. All over the planet Earth, we'll be organizing dozens of African Liberation Day commemorations throughout Africa, Europe, and the Americas. And the theme that we have for 2024 is Same Struggle, Smash Settler Colonialism in Palestine, Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. Same struggle, Smash Settler Colonialism in Palestine, Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. And if you didn't know or don't know, we talked about Oceania is the territories, the land bases between Asia and the Americas. Places like Australia, Hawaii, Fiji, these are all a part of Oceania, and they're all settler colonies, like the Americas are, like Southern Africa is, like occupied Palestine, like Ireland, all of them colonies, right? So that's what we're talking about it in the context of it being the same struggle, you all. That's why we're talking about Cinco de Mayo today. We're not indigenous people to the Western Hemisphere, obviously. We're African people. But we're talking about it because the struggle is the same thing. You know, and a lot of people, when they're talking about the indigenous struggle, even a lot of people within the indigenous movement, like they have a lot of the same struggles that we have as African people, because colonialism has worked overtime to divide us from each other, from our own people. It's done that. So it is colonialism that created this concept within the minds of African people that we're different based on where we were born, which is absurd if you think about it, right? Like this is a very common state of consciousness today? Well, I was born in Kenya and you were born in the US, so we're different. I was born in Jamaica and you were born in Brazil, so we're different, even though all of us are Africans. And the reason why it's absurd to see ourselves as different is because these aren't decisions that we made. We didn't say, well, you know what? I want to travel across the world and camp in Brazil and settle there with my family. We didn't make that decision. The 100 million Africans in Brazil didn't make that decision. Those of us, the 50 million of us here in the United States of America, I don't care what kind of lie you want to tell yourself. We didn't make this decision to be here. We had nothing to do with it. We didn't decide to speak English. It was violently forced upon us. We didn't decide to be named Johnson and Smith and Jones and all these European property names that they put on us. It was violently forced upon us. So for us to act today in 2024 like our existence is our choice is absurd. That is the example of absurdity. That's absolute absurdity. And if Martians landed here 100 years from now and studied our conditions, they would have to conclude that them people were crazy as hell to accept that reality. That's colonialism's reality for us. So we have that among our African people, when clearly it was colonialism that kidnapped us, spread us all over the world. It was colonialism that denigrated our lives in Africa. So for us to adopt colonialism's definition of who we are is the epitome of colonial mentality in 2024. So we understand that, but the indigenous people have the same struggle. And I've seen this in my work with them. I've seen them sit around debating with each other about who has recognition as a tribe. I've seen that. I've seen them debate that. And I'm like, that's their struggle. They have a right to have that struggle. But I'm trying to understand, like, why are you basing your identity on recognition of the colonial entities, right? It's the same thing we do. I've seen them. I've seen them when we've had representatives of organizations that call themselves indigenous organizations or Indian organizations, as they call themselves, of the Western Hemisphere, interact with organizations that define themselves as Chicano, for example. And I've seen them act as if they were different people. Whereas Leonard Peltier, the imprisoned indigenous activist from the American Indian movement, he said in his book, The Writings of Leonard Peltier, the European asked him, well, how many Indians, the term he used at that time, how many Indians are there in the US? There's only about 1 million or 2 of them. And Peltier said, no, that's not true. We've got millions of indigenous people. You're just calling indigenous people Hispanic and Latino, but those are our people. That's the correct analysis. It's not our place to tell indigenous people, but we've been down this road before. We know how they've tried to divide us as African people. So that's for indigenous people. They will figure that out. But the point is that our struggles are the same. And anyone who doesn't see that, you're just not looking far enough, because the same strategy used against them to divide and conquer them against one another is the same strategy used against us. All you have to do is go online and you see all types of African people debating about whether we're the same people based on where we live, when we had nothing to do with where we live. The colonizer decided that for us. We had nothing to do with that. But yet we're accepting that and defining that as our identity. The absolute absurdity. You can go online and see that within 2 minutes. You can go online and see that among the indigenous people within 2 minutes. Then to add salt to the wound, we got all these Africans here in the US, because it's not happening anywhere else in the world, because most people in the world aren't nearly as confused as people in the US. People in the US are, as Kwame Ture used to say, you have this is the most information-based society in the world, and you have the most ignorant people in the world here in this country. It's absolutely correct. And so you have these Africans here who are sitting around talking about, well, I'm native, I'm indigenous to the Western Hemisphere. And we understand why they're saying that, because the wealth of the US is based largely on exploiting Africa. And so the worst thing for the capitalist system is for Africans to wake up and recognize our relationship to Africa, because then we will want to claim our wealth back. So they don't want that. So they have worked overtime for centuries denigrating Africa, making Africa a place that most of us here want absolutely nothing to do with. And so as long as we're in that frame of mind, we're never going to question why are they getting all of their wealth from Africa, but we don't have any of it. We're never going to think of it like that. We're never going to question that. Instead, we'll think the way they want us to think, which is, well, instead of me understanding why I should not own and control the production of the cars when all the resources to make the damn cars comes from the same place, Africa, that I do, instead, I'll just beg these people to work at their car factory here. And if I do that, I'll think I'm really sorry. I'll think I'm better than everybody else because I got a job working for the master. I'm the first one. I'm the only one working there. You hear our people talk like that all the time. I'm the only one in there. Like that's some sort of accomplishment. I'm the only one that works there. I'm the only slave that they felt was good enough to work right under them, sniffing their armpits and cleaning up after them and doing the work that the master wanted me to do. I'm the only one that was good enough to do that. I mean, that's the ravings of a mad person. But yet every day, that's what we do. And it's the same with the indigenous people. But we are claiming to be indigenous because it shows you how bad our self-confidence is. Because the indigenous people are not in any better condition than us, but we hate ourselves so much as Africans that we want to claim an identity based on a fantasy that we've created in our head that we have absolutely no evidence to justify. Anything, we'll do anything to be separate from Africa, but we are not concerned about this because we know that this is just a reflection of what the colonists have put in place, what the capitalists and imperialists have put in place. And as soon as Africa is free, united, and socialist, there are not going to be any Africans running around here talking about, I ain't got nothing to do with Africa. They're going to want to have everything to do with Africa because everything that they want is going to be coming from Africa. So we're not worried about that. That's just the work that we have to do. But this is understanding what we're dealing with when we talk about this question of land. And when we talk about Cinco de Mayo in land, you know, indigenous people have a number of organizations, just like African people have a number of organizations. We've just listed a few here, depending upon how they choose to organize. And again, it's their right. You know, you can't colonize the people for 531 years and then criticize them when there's some confusion. You can't tell them that their identity is a European identity and that's not who they are, and then criticize them because they're confused about that. Same with us as African people. You can't split up our families for centuries, demean us, denigrate us, treat us like dogs, and then act like you don't understand why we call each other dogs. You don't understand why we sometimes act like dogs, why we walk around sniffing under each other just like a dog would do. That is not hard to understand at all if you understand what's happened to us as a people. And I'm talking about both of our communities. So the indigenous people, like African people, will decide their direction. You know, there are a number of organizations. El Partido de Raza Unida, indigenous organization. From our perspective, Ilahi Spirit Runners, indigenous organization. From our perspective, American Indian Movement, indigenous organization. From our perspective, Red Nation, indigenous organization. The indigenous people have their own agency, just like African people have our own agency. They will decide what direction they want to go in. The only thing we'll say about that is in the APRP, we don't spend a single moment telling African people, well, don't join that African organization. You what kind of fool when the masses of our people are completely disorganized? What kind of fool would continue the division by telling people don't join that organization? You know, the person who is talking the loudest about how intelligent they are, how rich they are, how handsome they are, all of that is probably the poorest, ugliest person in the room. That's usually how that works. So we don't adopt that backward anti-human strategy within the APRP. Instead, what we do is what you hear us say all the time. Join some organization working for our people. Join some organization working for justice. You decide. We just make the point that's irrefutable that you got to be in some organization helping our people, helping humanity. You decide which one. We don't set trip. We're not a gang. We don't tell people, well, you got to join the APRP or you ain't, you know what. We don't do that. And anybody doing that, I'm sorry, you just do not understand the nature of how to build capacity in this struggle. You don't understand it. And you're letting your ego get in the way of seriously creating that capacity. Because this ain't about no ego. I have people, I spend so much of my time talking to people. Just in the last couple of weeks, I've done 2 separate orientations for the APRP, to join the APRP. One person told me, well, I just don't see what you all are doing as a solution. No problem. I didn't get mad at him and cuss him out. I told him, that's fine. You still got to join some organizations. You decide which one it is. And if you leave here and you don't do that, then no matter what you say about us, you're the one that's the problem. And then the other one said, yeah, I want to do it. But then a day later said, yeah, I don't think I can do it. Okay, no problem whatsoever with that. But same thing, like, well, whatever it is that you can do, figure that out and then do that. So I don't see that, like, this is the process that we're engaged in. It's not a waste of my time. It's not, why can't these people get themselves together? If you understand revolution, Kwame Nkrumah talked about consciousness and self-consciousness. Consciousness is when people say, man, that's jacked up how this system oppresses people. You can find people everywhere that understand that and do that. It's jacked up what this system does. It's wrong. It's corrupt. Yeah, I would say 80-85% of the people you encounter have some understanding of that. That's consciousness. Self-consciousness is where you get into the realm of revolutionary consciousness, because self-consciousness, it's not enough for you to just recognize a problem. You have to see it as your responsibility to do something about the problem. And you have to see that. So for revolutionary consciousness, you'll never hear us talking about, well, this person wasted our time by wanting to talk to us about the struggle. Because we recognize that everybody we talk to, that's one more person that understands the work we're doing. Whether they decide to do it right now is immaterial to us, because we know, as Marcus Mosiah Garvey told us 100 years ago, you don't know what impact you will have on another human being. You may not have that impact today. You may not live long enough to see that impact, but that impact might manifest itself later. So it's only an egotistical person that spends all their time worried about how people respond to them individually. We don't worry about that. Do the work, damn it. Don't worry about that. Do the work. That's what you can control. That's your responsibility. The rest of it is up to the people that you're working with, and they have to figure out what they will do. But we certainly know that this question of, Mexico, Mexicans, Chicanos, indigenous, that's the right of the indigenous people to resolve that right. They have every right to wage that struggle and get to the level of agreement that best represents their best opportunity to be free. It's nobody else's damn business how they engage that struggle. They have every right to engage that struggle, and we support their right to engage that struggle because we understand it. We told you, same struggle. We understand it because we have the same struggle in our communities, and it's our right to wage that struggle with each other. It's nobody else's damn business. You can see how colonialism works. Whether it's indigenous people or African people, it's the same thing. You go on any online page and Africans are talking about, anytime there's a post, whether it's TikTok or whatever, and you have an African talking about African people all over the world are the same. You have all these people, a lot of them Europeans, coming in there saying, no, you're not the same. That's their job, is to continue to sabotage our right to unify. It's none of your, and I always get on there and troll. I say, it's none of your damn business. how we identify. What are you doing here? Go to some white page that's talking about the best kayak to get back to Europe. I troll the hell out of it, and we'll continue to do so. And whenever I don't have a lot of time, but I can do a lot more faster than a lot of people. So 10 minutes to me, I can troll 5 or 6 times in 10 minutes. You know, I'm a writer. I know how to do it. So I'll do that. So we have every right as African people to engage our struggle around our identity, just like indigenous people. And we are doing that. That is happening. There is more, I'm telling you, there's more consciousness today about us being African than there ever has been. There's more consciousness today, despite all the confusion. The confusion has always been there, but there's more consciousness about who we are and that we're African people. There's more understanding about our relationship to Africa, no matter where we are on the planet Earth. There's more work taking place to unite us around the concept of being African and making Africa primary. We're not where we need to be, no question about that, but we're moving in the right direction. And it's not a comparison between our communities, because it's like Amit Secretary told us, it's not where you are, it's how far you have come. That's the defining thing. So indigenous people will work that out. African people will work that out. Asian people will work that out. Everybody will work that out, given their opportunity to work within their communities. And our responsibility is just to support each other in working out these contradictions. That's what we need to do, is just support each other in working that out. So class, of course, is a critical factor, because when we call ourselves African, this is just one humble suggestion that we make to other communities, as well as our own community. When we call ourselves African, we're not talking about race. We're certainly not talking about where you're born. That has nothing to do. It's like Nkrumah said, you're African not because you were born in Africa, but because Africa was born in you. And you got to understand that statement on a deep level, you all. It's not a superficial statement at all. It's a very deep statement. What he's saying is that we define African identity primarily from a political perspective. And a humble suggestion we make is that other colonized people would do well to consider that logic within their struggles. So when we call you African, we're not talking about your race. We're not talking about the social construct of race. Like people are like, well, how you doing, African? Oh, I'm not African, I'm half white. You missed the whole point. You totally missed it. When we call you African, we're making a political distinction. We're saying that no matter what you do or where you are, your future is tied to the future of Africa. That's a political question. Doesn't matter what language you speak, what food you like, what music you listen to, who you're dating. None of those things define that. I know that's hard for some of us to understand. It's very difficult for some of us to understand. But identity is primarily a political question. There are layers to it. That's the point we're making. And the first thing for us is to recognize that we're all connected to the African continent. That has nothing to do with where we live. And so, you know, for indigenous people, again, same struggle. We think it's a very similar thing in that the most important thing right now has got to be these lands, the Americas, and who they belong to. They certainly don't belong to the European people. So I don't see why indigenous people need to fight each other over that. That's not who created the problem. None of y'all, whether you identify as Chicano or indigenous, you didn't create this problem. So the problem can't be solved just by you debating each other. You got to deal with the fundamental contradiction. I mean, that's just how we see it. We got to deal with the fundamental contradiction. When we encounter Africans and they're telling us, I ain't no African, I'm not angry at them, because what they're doing is manifesting what they've been taught through the miseducation of the capitalist system. So I can't be mad at them. We just have to give them patience and care and understanding and nurturing and develop that political consciousness, because these are political questions. That's what they are. And that will happen. So those of you that feel like you have these questions resolved, like we're Africans, period. Okay, we're indigenous people, period. Okay, that doesn't mean that you've resolved anything. That just means that your work is just now starting, because you got to go out and work with your people to get that level of consciousness spreading like wildfire. That's what needs to happen. So this is how we define this question of Cinco de Mayo and land for indigenous people. The fact that the French were repulsed from further colonizing Mexico, which had already been colonized by the Spanish, right? This is a question of land reclamation, the return of land to its rightful caretakers, the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And understanding that there will always be some indigenous people that are going to side with the colonizer. That's the class contradiction. There will always be African people that are going to side with the interests of the colonizer. There's no question about that. So we're looking at the people who recognize the contradiction and are ready to organize with the masses of people, the people's class, as Secretary taught us. That's who we're looking at. We're not looking for the petty bourgeoisie and the bourgeoisie that want to organize in the interests of capitalism and imperialism, no matter what color they are. We're not looking for capitalism in blackface. We're looking to organize to run right over those kind of people. That's what we're doing. That's the work that we're trying to do. So again, it's important for us to understand that our struggles are the same. And to reiterate the theme that we have for African Liberation Day 2024, same struggle, smash settler colonialism in Palestine, Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. And just to remember that, because the enemies of humanity are doing everything they can to keep us divided within our communities and with each other as colonized people. They want to keep us divided. And I hear it among African people all the time. Well, them Arabs ain't did nothing for us. First, you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't read a single book about there, and there are so many books out here about African and Palestinian solidarity. You haven't even read one sentence from one of those books. So why the hell would I want to listen to you? You don't do the work. All you do is sit in your dark house, sit behind a keyboard and hope the electricity doesn't go out so you can continue to type confusion onto the internet. Why would we want to listen to you? Those of us who are out here and have been out here for decades doing this work, why the hell would we listen to someone like you? So we're talking about informed analysis here. That's what we're talking about. And so we know that that kind of xenophobic analysis of our struggle is not going to get us anywhere. Where has it gotten us up to this point? That's not healthy Black nationalism. That's egotistical, individualistic Black nationalism. That's the kind of Black nationalism that's supportive of capitalism and patriarchy and homophobia and all the things that do nothing to advance our people. Nothing at all. Because I can tell you right now, I don't have a single problem in my life that's the result of Palestinian people. I don't have a single problem in my life that's the result of indigenous people. Not one problem that I experience is because of African women and marginalized African people. Not one problem in my life is related to trans people. I don't have a single problem related to any of those people. Not one problem I have is related to Asian people. Not one problem I have is only one problem with poor white people, and that's that poor white people continue to be pawns for the capitalist system, and that creates problems for us that we have to deal with. When they join groups like the Proud Boys and the militias and the KKK. But other than that, I don't have any problems related to poor white people. You're not in a position to do anything to impact my life. You're the worst position, most of you, than I am. That's why you're in those backward ass organizations that you're in. The dominant source of my problem, and I would argue this is true for everyone, is the international capitalist and imperialist system. I could stay here for the next 6 hours telling you all the problems I have in my life that are related to that backward system. So that's why we choose to focus our attention on that and not on all these other things that are designed to keep us derailed and confused about where our focus needs to be. That's what it is. So it is possible and necessary to support non-African struggles. Stop all this damn nonsense. It is possible and necessary to support non-African struggles for liberation and at the same time stay true and strong and committed to African liberation. And anybody that says different is because they're not involved in the struggle, plain and simple. Not other than running their damn mouth, they're not involved. Because anybody that's involved would know this from the work that you're doing. You would know that. It's not a contradiction to engage in support for non-African struggles and at the same time stay committed to African liberation. That is not a contradiction. I've been doing it for going on 50 years. It can easily demonstrate how that happens all the time. Ain't nobody can tell me, well, you haven't been consistent to the African struggle. I've done more in one section of my life for African people than you're going to do your whole goddamn life. So we know that this is exactly the type of consciousness that we need for our people and for all of humanity. Donate to African Liberation Day 2024. Don't be stingy. Give to the people because this will come back. We're organizing African Liberation Day all over the African continent. And I just observed the budget requests coming in from all over our African areas, organizing Ghana and Kenya and Burkina Faso. We need y'all to support that. That's good on the ground work for our efforts to liberate Africa. So help us do it. Help us do it. And so we want to thank you for being here today. We appreciate you for sure. We certainly want to invite you back next Sunday, same time, same place. May 12th, we're going to commemorate the 1985, May 13th, 1985 bombing of the MOVE organization in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, United Snakes of America. So the topic is the MOVE bombing and U.S. counterinsurgency against liberation efforts. So join us next week. The top left QR code has a bunch of very important information. Hood Communists, you can reach the Hood Communist blog there. You definitely want to do that. You can reach the Forward Ever shop, the APRP shop for revolutionary conscious clothes. You definitely want to do that. You can go to abetterworld.me and you can look at all of these videos and have easy access to them without question. You want to be able to do that as well. You can see all the APRP programs that we have throughout the party beyond this one. So check that out. And then support African Liberation Day 2024. We have the donation links up there. We have it all over the world. You can go to africanliberationday.net, and next week going forward, we'll have that on the screen as well to find out where the African Liberation Day commemoration nearest you is being held. We also have the webinar for African Liberation Day that's taking place on Friday, May 24th, and we'll get that flyer up here as well. The flyer you do see is for the Oakland commemoration we have here in Northern California on May 25th. So if you're in the Bay Area during that time, you should come check it out. Let some people know. Even if you're not there, wherever you are, you know people in the Bay, let them know. This is how we do the work. Everybody has to take a piece of it. So let them know, hey, there's an African Liberation Day right in your area. You should go and check it out and support it. Please do that. And then the bottom of the screen, you can join the APRP, aprp-intl.org. The right bottom QR code is for our project in Burkina Faso, so support that. My book, A Guide for Organized Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. With everything going on now, doing a lot of this anti-fascist work, I fund it through sales on my book, so please let people know. Please, please, please let people know. Try to let at least one person know a week about all of this stuff. That's what you can do. If you're not an organization, that's the least you can do. And guess what? If you do that, if you have one person every week that you're telling what's going on, somebody different, that's organizing work. So that's a beautiful thing. That's what you should be doing. And you can't say you don't have time to do that. I mean, if you can't talk to one person a week, what the hell are you doing here? On Earth, I'm talking about. What are you doing on Earth? You can't talk to one person a week? You got to be careful. I mean, you're not fooling us. You're fooling yourself if you think I can't talk to one person a week. Everybody can do that. So let's get organized. African Liberation Day 2024 is coming. Get ready for it. Be strong. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. Forward ever, backwards never.